He thought she was just a thirsty traveler, an unusually tall, silent Apache girl standing alone under the burning sun. Out of mercy, the rancher offered her water, never expecting anything in return. But at dawn the next day, the ground trembled. 300 Apache warriors surrounded his ranch, their faces unreadable, their intentions unknown. As the giant girl stepped forward from their ranks, everything he believed about danger, honor, and dead in the frontier was about to be challenged in a way he never imagined. Before we ride deeper into the story, if the spirit of the old frontier still stirs your heart, the campfire tales, the courage, the dust, and the honor, then saddle up with us. Hit subscribe and ring the bell so you'll never miss another ride through the legends of the Wild West. Now, let's get back to the trail. Cole Maddox had been born to wand and fence in a wrench that taught him the arithmetic of thirst, how far a man could ride, how long a well would hold, how merciless the noon sun could be when it set its teeth into the prairie. That afternoon the summer lay over the land like a hot, slow hand, and he would have sworn the horizon shimmered with the breath of far-off fires, until he saw her, a figure so tall she seemed to belong to a different sky, an Apache woman 9 feet in stature, a living column of muscle moving with the weary, uncanny grace of someone who had crossed too many miles and still had the power to vanish. Her long dark hair hung damp and heavy over her right shoulder, glossy as riverweed, her skin a deep warm tan that drank the sun rather than reflecting it, and the suede of her cropped top and skirt clung to her frame like memory, trimmed in white and blue beadwork that caught the light in tiny, ruthless sparks. Cole slowed his horse without meaning to, the animal sensing his hand unclench, and he felt the old, brittle politics of these plains, hatred passed down like heirloom iron, suspicion like a second skin, press at the back of his neck. But what rose first in him was not a law or a warning but a simple, human calculation. She was dying of thirst. He rode closer, boots sinking into the baked dirt, and as he dismounted the woman did not turn with the theatrics of a stranger preparing for threat. She stood half leaning against the fence post, shoulders tight, chin set, eyes dark and wide and fixed on the water bag that hung from his saddle. He offered it by habit before words, cupped the leather in his hands, and watched her drink with the viper's focus of someone who had learned scarcity as a tutor and need as a command. She drank until her throat roared and the muscles in her neck worked like the workings of a clock. And when she finally lifted the container, her gaze met his, and there was, against the backdrop of all the danger he had been taught, no challenge, only a thin, trembling thread of fear and something like grief. He tried to ask her name, tried to fold his own fear into a question that might make things ordinary again. But she did not answer. Her lips pressed shut as if they carried a small, private hurt, and when Paul moved to take her hand, the motion that followed was too swift for any man of ordinary reach. She stepped back, the roll of her shoulders betraying strength not given but earned. And without a word she turned away and slipped into the tall grass with a speed that betrayed those vast limbs, a shadow uncoiling into the woods. Cole stood in the hot wind, the empty leather bag swinging at his hip, and something in the set of her shoulders and the way her back curved beneath the sun told him that this was no wandering child of chance but a woman carrying a story the land had not yet written down. For a long minute he watched where she had gone, feeling the peculiar ache of a man who had given water and received instead an absence, and the prairie took up its old noises, the distant scrape of hooves, the thin cry of hawks, and Cole felt the first seed of unease plant itself like a splinter beneath his skin. The notion that the day's simple mercy might be the thin edge of a much larger thing already turning toward him. Cole gathered his hands beneath the lean-to while the lantern swung and painted their faces in slow, honest strokes, and he told them about the woman at the fence, her 9-foot frame, the deep warm tan of her skin, hair damp and heavy over her right shoulder, the swede top trimmed with white and blue beadwork, and he said he had given her water because a man gives water when a throat is dry. The men heard him, and then they began to speak in the old, careful language of the range, which is sharpened by fear and long practice at reading signs. And old Ray spat tobacco into the dust and muttered that help in strangers like that invites trouble, that kindness sometimes opens a door you wish you left nailed shut, while Tommy, younger and hungry for a tale, suggested she might be a scout sent to mark weaknesses and measure the settler's courage, and another guessed she had been driven through the country and separated from her people, forced east by some pressure they did not know. Cole kept his answers short. She drank and left, and though his voice aimed to still the room, it couldn't quiet the small, insistent hum of worry already threading the men's minds, so that by night rumors braided themselves into odd shapes, whispers of giant tracks on neighboring ranges, stories of drums heard far off, and darker suggestions that war parties might be testing the edges of homesteads. Before dawn, 2 hands went out to check the perimeter and returned pale, carrying news that made chores move to a different tempo, for they had found footprints near the arroyo. Huge impressions pressed into soft soil like ovals with the blunt suggestion of toes, spaced in a gait no regular man could match. The kind of prints that made a man cock his head and suspect either trickery or something the world had not prepared him for. And those prints led toward the rocky north and then simply stopped where boulders crowded tight, as if whoever had left them had stepped into a place the ground refused to mark. A sudden, abrupt ending the men read like a page torn out of a book. Talk through the afternoon turned to watchfulness, and pairs walked the fence line with extra eyes while lights were left burning at the gate, and every distant sound, hawk cry, the shift of brush, was given the weight of omen. Cole, watching his hands becoming strange in their worries, seeing Ray check the bolt on the barn as if wood fastenings might hold against whatever returned, feeling the thin, hard knot of responsibility tightened in his belly. He kept seeing the woman's face when she lifted the water, focused, serious, sorrow braided into concentration, and could not unsee the way she took what she needed and stepped back into the long grass. And so he made small decisions he had not planned on, sending a pair to ride the North Ridge at first light and ordering the gates bolted sooner than usual. Acts that felt like admitting their ordinary rhythms had been interrupted. At supper, the talk returned to the woman, her size measured courage. Her beadwork was picked apart for clues, and each man felt the awkward worry that a small mercy might have led to consequence. At first, Cole thought the house had been set upon by the earth itself, a low rolling that made cuffs sing and boards complain. But when he shoved the door open, the trembling resolved into a terrible, deliberate arrangement. Across the prairie, stretched to the low blue of the far horizon, 300 Apache warriors stood in ranks that curved like the lip of a bowl and closed his ranch in a ring. Horses halted as if frozen mid-breath, shields propped and lances upright until they made a second, darker skyline. They had the patient stillness of something long practiced, the quiet that comes when men and animals have rehearsed restraint until it becomes a weapon. And at their center, Cole saw the woman from the fence, impossibly tall, 9 feet of compact muscle, long dark hair pulled back and slick over her right shoulder, the tan suede of her cropped top and skirt trimmed with white and blue beadwork, the thick leather belt at her waist cutting a clear line between histories, and she stood like a column among them, focused and serious, neither smiling nor shouting, simply present with a weight in her face that made Cole's stomach turn cold. The ranch hands froze at the sight, boots scuffing the dirt as rifles came up in rough, reflexive movements while men readied cartridges and counted distance in the sharp arithmetic of fear. Tommy's hands shook so that the metal clicked like a small, broken clock. Old Ray spat tobacco and hissed that a man ought to shoot first and ask questions later. And for a wild half-breath, the old stories and older suspicions unfurled between them. Scouts, raiders, a war party testing the edge of settlement. Cole heard it all, but he felt something else behind his ribs, a different accounting. The memory of a single afternoon and a leather water bag given by habit. The quiet consumption of the gift by a towering stranger whose eyes had held a trouble deeper than any of their gossip. He lifted his voice against the raw instinct for powder and iron and said, slow as a prayer and twice as firm, "Do not fire." The command landed like a stone in a pond and stopped the ripple of panic. Rifles wavered, shoulders dropped an inch, and the men, held between the reflex to kill and the muscle of patience, listened. The Apache line did not shift. No drumbeat rolled. No battle cry split the air. The silence around them felt deliberate, like a jury waiting for the reading of a charge. The horses breathed small steam into the cool light. The leather of saddles gleamed faint, and the faces behind shields were masks of paint and focus. Age and youth braided together into a single, unreadable community. Cole watched the woman, how she held herself as if containing a storm, how her jaw tightened and loosened as though she were speaking to someone inside herself rather than to him, and a strange, heavy hush settled. The morning became a thing charged with attention, a taut wire stretched between 2 ways of living on the land. He understood then that this was not the scattershot fury of a raiding band, but an assembly meant to measure, to count, to decide. They had come not necessarily to kill, but to see what he and his men would do. to test the shape of mercy and the price of a single choice. The air felt thicker, as if it held the potential of a verdict, and Cole felt the responsibility settle on him like a weight he could not hand off. Remembering the water bag and the girl's silent drink, he stood with empty hands and listened to the plane, feeling the long, small seconds stretch into consequence. The sun beat down on the hard-packed earth of the ranch yard, baking the tension into the very air as Cole Maddox stood frozen on his porch, his knuckles white where they gripped the rough-hewn railing, watching the impossible wall of Apache warriors that had materialized with the dawn. 300 men, painted for war and mounted on restless ponies, formed a breathing barricade that stretched across the horizon, their lances gleaming like a forest of steel thorns against the pale morning sky. And though his ranch hands were behind him, trembling and clutching their Winchesters with sweaty palms, Cole knew that a single shot fired now would turn this dust into a graveyard. The silence was heavier than the heat, a suffocating blanket that made the sudden movement in the center of the tribal line feel like a thunderclap, drawing every eye as the tightly packed ranks of horses shifted and parted with a reverent fluidity, making way for something, or someone, that commanded the center of the storm. Out of the dust and the shadows of the horses emerged a figure that defied the natural order of the frontier, a silhouette so imposing that Cole's breath caught in his throat. For walking forward with a stride that shook the ground was not a cheat on horseback, but the woman he had pitied only yesterday, though the creature approaching him now bore little resemblance to the desperate, parched wanderer who had collapsed near his fence line. She was a Titan, a young adult woman standing fully 9 feet tall, her sheer physical scale making the seasoned warriors flanking her look like children. And where yesterday she had been slumped with exhaustion, today she moved with the predatory grace of a mountain lion, her muscular physique rippling with kinetic potential that suggested raw, unbridled strength and peak-s licensing. The morning light caught the deep, warm tan of her skin, turning it to burnished copper, while her long, dark hair, black as a raven's wing, was pulled back severely to reveal the sharp, serious angles of her face, the heavy mass of it hanging down her back and spilling over her right shoulder with a slick, almost watching that suggested she had been ritually cleansed for this moment. Gone were the rags of a refugee, replaced now by the regalia of high station. She wore a crop top made of soft, expertly cured dance weight or buckskin that tied at the back, exposing a midriff defined by abdominal muscles that looked carved from stone and powerful arms capable of crushing a man. The garment trimmed with intricate white and blue beadwork near the neckline that shimmered like captured pieces of the sky. A matching dance weight skirt, possibly chaps, was visible at her waist, held secure by a thick, utilitarian leather belt that emphasized the terrifying proportions of her frame, and in her massive right hand, she gripped a thick, carved staff that struck the earth with a rhythmic thud, each impact vibrating through the floorboards beneath Cole's boots. The transformation was absolute and terrifying, for as she stepped into the open space between the ranch and the war party, it became undeniably clear that the warriors were not looking at Cole with hatred, but at her with a profound, almost terrified awe, their eyes tracking her every movement as if she were a deity made flesh. Cole watched, mesmerized and horrified, realizing with a sinking feeling in his gut that the girl he had offered a cup of water was not a stray to be pitied, but a force of nature to be feared, a skyborn entity whose presence anchored the entire army behind her. She stopped 10 paces from the porch, her shadow engulfing the stairs, and simply stood there, her expression focused and serious, devoid of the fear he had seen yesterday, replaced now by an imperious calm that silenced the wind itself. The ranch hands behind Cole ceased their whispering, the click of the rifle hammer being pulled back echoing too loudly in the stillness, causing the giant woman's eyes to narrow slightly. But she did not flinch. Instead, slowly and deliberately, she raised her left hand, palm open, and the subtle shifting of 300 horses ceased instantly, the wall of warriors freezing into statues at her silent command, a display of authority that no ordinary chief could summon. The realization hit Cole like a physical blow. She had not been lost yesterday. She had been enduring something, and she had not returned to the wilderness to hide, but to lead. And now she stood before him not as a beggar at the gate, but as the gatekeeper of his fate, a queen of the plains returning to her people with the power of life and death resting casually in her massive hands, leaving Cole to wonder if the water he had given her was enough to buy their lives or if he had merely delayed an execution delivered by Goddess of the Earth, the terrible. ringing silence that followed Thala's hand signal was broken by the sharp nicker of a pony and the jangling of a bridle. From the line of warriors, moving to stand beside the towering, 9-foot-tall woman, an elder rode forward, his face a map of deeply etched wrinkles, his silver hair bound in two long, thin braids that lay against a simple buckskin shirt adorned with polished bone. He was old, but his back was straight, and he sat astride his restless black pony with an authority that needed no physical bulk, his eyes, like sharp chips of obsidian, fixing instantly on Cole Maddox, who still stood paralyzed on his porch. The chief's gaze bypassed the armed ranchers completely, dismissing them as irrelevant, and when he spoke, his voice was not a shout, but a sharp, cutting instrument that sliced through the heavy morning air, carrying surprising power in a clear, if heavily accented, English. "You, white man," the elder chief declared, his voice resonating with absolute authority, "you are the one who owns this wooden house. You will answer for what you have done." He gestured with an gnarled hand, not to Cole, but to the colossal, muscular woman beside him, who remained perfectly still, her face a mask of focused, serious neutrality. "This is Tala," the chief's voice hardened. "She is Esdayeti the Skyborn. She is the daughter of the high peaks, blessed by the spirits with the strength of the mountain and the height of the trees. She is revered. She is our strength. And she was on her trial, alone, as the spirits demanded. Then she was found, broken and weak, near your fence. The accusation hung in the air, thick and poisoned. You found her," the chief continued, his eyes narrowing into slits of pure suspicion. "She was weakened by her fast, and you took her. What did you do to her? Did you hold her captive? Did you harm her?" The implication was dark and immediate, suggesting a violation far deeper than mere kidnapping, an attempt to break a figure they considered divine. The ranch hands stirred nervously, but Cole held up a hand, forcing them to silence, and stepped forward to the edge of the porch steps, his own hands conspicuously empty and open at his sides. "No," Cole said, his voice straining to remain even. "I swear on this land, no. She was collapsed. Dehydrated. I've never seen thirst like that. I gave her water from my canteen. That is all I did." He tried to convey the simplicity of the act, the fundamental human decency of it. "She drank, and then she was gone. I never harmed her. I never held her. It was just water." The chief listened, his expression unmoving, before letting out a short, sharp puff of air that might have been a laugh if it held any humor. "Water," he spat the word, as if it were a curse. "The white man's kindness is a sharp knife hidden in a soft cloth. You give water to a dying animal only to lead it to a cage. You offer peace with one hand while the other loads a rifle. You think we do not know this?" The chief's gaze swept across the ranch, at the barn, the bunkhouse, the fences that carved up the open prairie. "You settlers see something beautiful, something powerful, and your only thought is how to own it, how to break it and put it on display. You saw the Skyborn in her moment of trial weakness, and you thought to capture a miracle." He turned his pony slightly, addressing the wall of warriors behind him. "He says he only gave her water. He says he did not harm the Skyborn." "Hello," angry murmur rose from the 300 men, a sound like hornets stirring at a nest. Cole's denials were frantic now. "It's the truth. Ask her. She's right there. Ask her what happened." But the chief ignored him, his eyes locking back onto Cole's. "Your tongue is forked. Your words mean nothing. The Skyborn does not lie, but she does not have to speak for us to see the truth. We see it in your eyes." The chief raised his chin, and a sharp command in Apache echoed across the yard. The response was instantaneous and terrifying. Imperfect, terrifying unison. 300 horses took one single, deliberate step forward, the sound of their hooves striking the earth as one, a concussive thud that vibrated through the soles of Cole's boots. The circle, which had been a distant threat, was now an immediate cage, the ring of lances and angry faces tightening, shrinking the world down to this small, dusty patch of indefensible ground, sealing the ranch and everyone in it inside a wall of impending judgment. While we catch our breath by this dusty road, go on and tip your hat to the last rodeo. Give this story a like and subscribe so you can ride with us again soon. All right then. Let's get back on the trail. The air was so taut and hummed, compressed by the tightening ring of mounted warriors, their ponies snorting and stamping in the dust. The metallic scent of horse sweat and hot steel filling Cole's lungs as he braced for the inevitable charge that would annihilate them all. The chief's final words, "We see it in your eyes," felt like a death sentence, a judgment delivered and sealed. Cole's ranch hands were frozen, their rifles suddenly feeling like useless sticks against this ocean of poised violence, their faces pale with the certainty of their demise. The chief sat his pony, his obsidian chip eyes glittering with the grim satisfaction of a truth confirmed, awaiting only his own signal to unleash the tide of vengeance. It was into this suffocating, final moment of silence that a new sound emerged, a sound so unexpected and profound that it seemed to stop the rotation of the earth itself. It was not a shout, but a vibration, a resonant frequency that Cole felt in his teeth and in the wooden planks beneath his boots before he even processed it as a voice. When Tala, the 9-foot-tall skyborn, spoke for the first time, her voice was a deep, steady contralto, as clear as a bell yet as heavy as shifting granite, a sound that carried absolute, innate authority without any need for volume, instantly cutting through the nervous energy of the 300 warriors, silencing the stamping horses, and causing the old chief to start as if he'd been physically struck. All motion ceased, every warrior, every settler, even the wind in the eaves of the barn seemed to hold its breath as the giant woman, who had been as still and silent as a statue, turned her head just enough to fix her focused, serious gaze upon the elder. "Honored elder," she began, her accented English perfect and measured, the deep timbre of her voice causing the air to thrum. "Your wisdom is the root of our people, and your mistrust of the white eyes is a shield carved from a history of their broken promises and our people's blood. You are right to see poison in their wells." The chief stared, his expression a mixture of shock and reverence, stunned into silence by her words. Then, Tala slowly lifted one massive, muscular arm and pointed a single, long finger not at the chief, but directly at Cole Maddox. "But this man," her voice resonated, unwavering, "speaks the truth." A collective gasp, a sharp intake of breath, passed through the ranch hands behind Cole. The Apache warriors murmured, their certainty broken, their eyes darting between their revered skyboard and their elder chief. "I was on my sacred trial," Tala continued, her voice painting a picture of the day before. "The spirits demanded I cross the sun's anvil, to find my strength in solitude or to return to the earth. For 3 days, the sun was my only companion, and the spirits tested my body with a great thirst. I failed." Her admission of failure, spoken so plainly, caused another ripple of shock through the warriors. "My body, this form you call skyborn, betrayed me. I collapsed by this man's fence. I was dying. The trial was over, and I was waiting for the spirits to claim me." She paused, her gaze sweeping over the warriors. "I saw him approach. I had no strength to lift my staff. I had no strength to fight. I expected what our people have always been taught to expect from his kind, a bullet for the savage or a rope for the prize. I prepared for the final cruelty." Her eyes locked back onto Cole, who stood mesmerized, his heart hammering. He did not bring a rifle. He did not bring a rope. He saw not an Apache, not an enemy, not a giant. He saw only thirst. He knelt, uncorked his canteen, and he offered me water. He gave me his life, and he asked for nothing in return. He did not touch me. He did not try to hold me. He gave me the water, and he walked away, leaving me to my trial. She turned back to the chief, her 9-foot frame seeming to grow even larger, eclipsing the sun. "His act of mercy saved my life. You say settlers disguise harm under kindness. This man disguised nothing. He showed honor where any other of his kind would have shown cruelty. He showed humanity when I had none left." She raised her carb stack and drove the butt of it into the hard-packed earth with a solid, definitive thud that shook the ground. "No blood will be shed here," she proclaimed, her voice deepening with command. "We will not answer an act of honor with an act of war. You will not harm the man who saved the skyborn." The reaction was immediate but confused. The warriors, bound by a deep, spiritual respect for her word, visibly relaxed their killing intent. Lances that had been leveled at Cole's chest were slowly, reluctantly, lifted until they pointed toward the sky. Shields that had been held high were lowered to rest on their knees. The immediate, suffocating threat of a massacre had vanished, evaporated by her testimony. But the tension did not dissolve, it merely changed. The warriors remained in their tight circle, their faces a mixture of confusion, frustration, and grudging obedience. The chief's face was a mask of thunder, his accusation broken, but his suspicion, and the tribe's anger, still lingered in the air like the heavy scent of ozone after a lightning strike. Just as the collective breath of the standoff was released and the forest of lances began to dip toward the earth in a gesture of tentative peace, the fragile calm was shattered by the shrill, aggressive cry of a war pony breaking ranks from the western flank of the formation. A young Apache war scout, his chest streaked with aggressive vermilion paint and his eyes burning with the fierce, unyielding ambition of youth, kicked his mount forward, driving it between the elder chief and the towering figure of Tala, effectively physically cutting the line of communication that had just begun to form. He did not look at Cole with the curiosity of the others, but with a hatred so pure it felt like heat radiating from a furnace, and he raised a rifle high above his head, shaking it as he shouted in his native tongue before switching to a broken, jagged English that was meant to ensure the settlers understood exactly why they were about to die. He turned his fierce gaze upon the chief, his voice rising in a crescendo of accusation as he pointed a trembling finger not at Cole, but at the horizon where the sun had set the previous day. He claimed that while the Skyborn spoke of mercy, her memory was clouded by the spirits of the trial, for he and his scouting party had been tracking her path from the ridges, and they had heard the distinct, rolling thunder of gunfire echoing from the direction of the ranch just as the sun touched the earth, the very moment Tala had collapsed. The scout argued with a terrifying, frantic logic that the Skyborn, this 9-foot-tall woman of muscular physique and immense strength, would not have fallen solely from the heat, for she was the daughter of the mountain and the sun, and that it was the white man's bullets that had driven her to the ground, hunting her like a trophy animal until she was too weak to fight back. The accusation hit the assembly like a physical blow, causing the warriors to stiffen, their knuckles whitening on their weapons once more as the narrative shifted instantly from a story of salvation to one of a failed ambush. Cole felt a cold knot of dread tighten in his stomach as the realization washed over him with the force of a tidal wave. He remembered the shots clearly, the crack of 3 rifle rounds fired by his foreman, Jeb, to scare off a pack of bold coyotes that had been digging near the chicken coop in the late afternoon, a meaningless, routine chore of ranch life that had now been twisted by timing and proximity into an act of attempted murder against a holy figure. Cole took a step forward, his hands raising in a desperate plea, shouting that the shots were for coyotes, mere scavengers, and that they had never seen the girl until she was at the fence. But his voice was drowned out by the rising murmur of 300 angry men who found the scouts' version of events far more aligned with their bitter experience of frontier treachery. The scouts seized on Cole's admission of the shooting, screaming that the white man admitted to firing the weapons, twisting the explanation of coyotes into a metaphor for how settlers view the Apache people as pests to be exterminated. All eyes turned to Tala, the anchor of the storm, looking for her to strike down a line. But for the first time, the giant woman looked uncertain. She stood there, her massive frame casting a long shadow, the deep, warm tan of her skin glowing in the harsh light, her serious, focused expression cracking slightly to reveal a flicker of internal conflict. In her delirium of thirst and heat exhaustion the day before, the line between reality and hallucination had blurred. She remembered the burning sun and the parched earth. But now that the scout mentioned it, did she recall the crack of gunfire? Had she heard the thunder of weapons as she fell? Her loyalty to her people and the protective anger of the young scout warred with the memory of Cole's cool water and silent kindness, and she hesitated, her brow furrowing beneath the slick, dark hair that hung over her shoulder. That hesitation was all the fuel the war faction needed, seeing their Skyborn uncertain, seeing the doubt in the eyes of the woman who wore the sacred blue and white beadwork. The warriors interpreted her silence as a confirmation that she might have been attacked without knowing it, or that her memory was indeed fragmented by the ordeal. The lances snapped back up, the bowstrings were drawn taut with a collective creak, and the elder chief's face hardened once more into stone, the temporary bridge of understanding collapsing under the weight of a tragic, coincidental truth, leaving Cole standing on his porch watching the misunderstandings of 2 different worlds spiral rapidly toward a massacre that neither side truly wanted but seemed powerless to stop. The air crackled, thick with the smell of ozone and the renewed promise of violence. The young war scout's accusation had reignited the fire, his words painting Cole as a cowardly ambusher and Talus' hesitation serving as the tinder. The lances were leveled again, the warriors poised for the order, their collective anger a palpable wave washing over the small ranch. Cole's frantic denials about the coyotes were lost in the rising tide of hatred, his words nothing but the buzzing of a fly in a windstorm. But the elder chief, his face a mask of granite, did not give a signal. He looked at Cole's desperate, open palm stance, then at the burning, ambitious hatred in the young scout's eyes, and finally at the imposing, conflicted figure of Tala, who stood silent, her gaze distant. Her word, even in doubt, held the power of a spirit, and to ignore her initial defense of Cole in favor of the scout's hot-blooded claim was a risk he would not take. "Ashi," the chief commanded, his voice sharp, cutting through the din. "Enough. The Skyborn's memory is clouded by the trial. The scout's eyes are clouded by his youth. We will not start a war based on shadows and echoes. We will find the truth in the earth, which does not lie." He dismounted his pony in a single, fluid motion, his age belying his agility, and his moccasins made no sound on the hard-packed dirt. He pointed a gnarled finger first at Cole, then at the scout. "You, white man, you will walk with us." Then he nodded to Tala. "Skyborn, you'll be the judge. Your eyes see what ours cannot. You'll show us what happened yesterday." The chief ordered Tala to lead the way to the spot where Cole had found her, and the procession began. The 9-foot-tall woman, her expression once again focused and serious, turned and began to walk toward the fence line, her long, muscular strides covering the ground effortlessly. Cole walked beside her, acutely aware of the chief on his other side and the simmering presence of the young scout just behind them, his breathing hot and angry on Cole's neck. The rest of the war party, 300 mounted men, followed at a distance, forming a slow, silent, moving perimeter around the investigation, their eyes fixed on the bizarre procession of the towering giant, the small rancher, the angry scout, and the old chief. Every step was in agony for Cole. He knew he was innocent, but he was walking on Apache terms, to be judged by their laws and their spiritual leader, who was the very subject of the entire dispute. He glanced at Thala. The sun caught the intricate white and blue beadwork on her tan suede crop top, and the light reflected off the slick, dark hair that hung over her right shoulder. She seemed entirely absorbed in the ground beneath her feet, her gaze sweeping the dusty, cracked earth with an intensity Cole had only ever seen in trackers following a cold trail. They reached the fence line, the same spot where Cole had offered his canteen. It was a patch of disturbed, rocky soil just beyond the main pasture. "This is where I saw her," Cole said quietly, pointing to a slight indentation in the earth where a massive body had clearly lain. The chief grunted, his eyes scanning the area, but it was Tala who took charge. She raised a hand, signaling for silence, and began to walk in a slow, deliberate circle, her head bowed. Her focus was absolute. She moved with a grace that was startling in a creature of her size. Her muscular physique, the strength of the mountain, as the chief had called it, now applied to the delicate task of reading the land. She knelt, a motion that was like a boulder settling, and touched the ground near where the coyote tracks had been. Her long fingers brushed the dirt, sifting it. Then she moved toward the fence. "The shots," the chief demanded, looking at Cole. "Where did they come from?" Cole pointed toward the bunkhouse. "My foreman was standing there. The coyotes were here," he said, gesturing to a patch of scrub. The young scout scoffed. "He points where he pleases. A light to cover a lie." "Silence," Paula's deep voice commanded, and the scout flinched as if struck. She had found something. Near the base of a fence post, half hidden by a clump of dry buffalo grass, she plucked something small and metallic from the third. She held it up for the chief to see, a gleaming brass bullet casing. The scout surged forward. "See, proof. His bullets." Paula did not look at him. She rose to her full 9-foot height, holding the casing, and turned her head, sniffing the air. Then she walked 20 paces, her eyes locked on the ground, and knelt again. She pointed. "Here," she stated. The chief and Cole bent down. In the dust were the unmistakable, 4-toed tracks of a coyote, and then another, scuffed and chaotic. "The skuya," the chief murmured, identifying the animal. Tala nodded, her face impassive. They were digging. Here. She pointed to the disturbed earth near the chicken coop, just as Cole had said. Then she walked from the casing to the coyote tracks and finally to the shallow depression where she had collapsed. She stood there for a long moment, closing her eyes, seemingly replaying the event in her mind. When she opened them, her gaze was clear, the conflict gone, replaced by the same absolute certainty she'd had when she'd stopped the army. She turned to the chief and the assembled warriors. The scout speaks with a loyal heart, but his eyes were too far away. The white man speaks the truth. She held up the single casing. This bullet was fired from the ranch, but it was fired toward the fence, not from it. The tracks of the coyotes are deep and frantic. They show the animals scattered from this spot, running from the noise of the rifle, not from me. She then pointed to the shallow depression where she had fallen. This is where I fell. There are no other tracks here. There are no boot prints, no horse tracks, no sign of a struggle. There is no blood in the soil. There are no other casings. If they had ambushed me, the ground would tell the story of a battle. But the only story the earth tells is of one body, falling alone from thirst, and of coyotes scared away by a rancher. She fixed the young scout with a look that was not angry, but heavy with the weight of her authority. The gunfire I heard in my weakness was the sound of these coyotes being driven off. It was not an attack. Her proclamation, delivered in that resonant, deep voice, was final. The young scout's face turned ashen, his accusation crumbling into dust. The warriors murmured, their anger visibly deflating, replaced by confusion and a grudging reconsideration, their certainty shattered by the undeniable judgment of the skyborn. The physical evidence had vindicated Cole Maddox in the eyes of the earth, clearing him of the scout's fabricated ambush. But as the sun climbed higher, casting the long, intimidating shadow of the 9-foot-tall skyborn across the dusty ranch yard, a heavier, more intangible cloud remained suspended over the assembly, where the laws of the Apache were not written merely in dust and bullet casings but in the rigid, unforgiving code of the spirit. The elder chief, though satisfied with the forensic truth regarding the gunfire, remained troubled by the ritual implications of the encounter, his eyes narrowing as he contemplated the violation of the sacred trial that had brought them to this precipice. For a skyborn does not simply wander the plains, she endures, and in enduring, she is supposed to stand apart from the world of men, relying solely on the spirits and the raw brutality of nature to forge her soul. The silence that followed Tala's proof was therefore not one of peace, but of a deeper, more complex questioning, a silent accusation that rippled through the ranks of the 300 warriors who sat their horses with stony uneasiness, wondering if their revered daughter of the mountains had tainted herself in her holy status by accepting the charity of an enemy. Tala, sensing the shifting tide in the unspoken judgment in the air, did not retreat. Instead, she stepped into the center of the tension, her massive, muscular physique radiating an intense, palpable power, the deep, warm tan of her skin glowing like burnished copper against the soft dance weight of her crop top. She swept her gaze across the faces of her people, her long, dark hair, still slick and heavy, sliding over her right shoulder like a curtain of midnight as she prepared to speak the hardest truth of all, her expression focused and serious. "You look at me and you see the water in my belly," she began, her voice low and resonant, vibrating with an honesty that felt dangerous in its vulnerability. "You wonder if the trial is broken. You wonder if I have failed the spirits by letting a white hand lift a canteen to my lips when I was commanded to survive alone." She paused, allowing the murmurs of agreement to rise and fall like the wind in the buffalo grass, the white and blue beadwork at her neckline catching the harsh sunlight as she took a deep breath, expanding her powerful test. "The trial of the skyborn is to walk the burning lands in silence," she declared, her voice rising to reach the furthest mounted warrior. "To rely on nothing but the wind for breath, the earth for a bed, and the spirits for strength. To accept the help of a man, any man, but especially a settler, is, by our oldest laws, to admit that my own strength was not enough to carry the burden." The young scout, though shamed by the earlier investigation, looked up with a flicker of renewed defiance, sensing a confession of weakness that he could exploit. Tala caught his eye and held it, unflinching. "I could have died there," she admitted, stripping away all pride. "My body was finished. The spirits had brought me to the edge of the great silence. By the strictness of our laws, I should have perished rather than take the water. By our laws, this man's kindness was a poison to my ritual. Cole watched her, stunned by the realization that his simple act of mercy had potentially ruined the very thing she was trying to achieve, that he had been an unwitting stumbling block in a sacred journey rather than a savior. But then, Tala's posture shifted. She planted her feet wide, her thick leather belt creaking slightly under the strain of her movement, her presence expanding until she seemed to fill the entire sky. "But I will not lie to you, and I will not lie to the spirits," she thundered, her voice echoing off the barn walls with the force of a canyon storm. "I drank because I chose to live, and in that choice, the spirit showed me a new truth." She turned to Cole, her dark eyes burning with an intensity that made him want to look away, yet he could not. "The trial was not just about my endurance," she proclaimed to the warriors, gesturing to the rancher with her carved staff. "It was a test of the land itself. The spirits placed this man in my path not as a trap, but as a question. Would the invader kill the Skyborn when she was weak? Would he capture her? Or would he show the spirit of the land, the spirit of life?" She raised a clenched fist, her arm muscles corded with tension. This man did not know I was Skyborn. He did not know I was a warrior. He saw only a life fading, and he gave it breath. If I had died, I would have kept my pride, but I would have missed this truth, that honor can exist even in the heart of the enemy. She looked back to the chief, her expression challenging him to deny her wisdom. "His kindness was not a violation of my trial, Father. It was the final test, and he passed it. To reject his water would have been pride. To accept it, and to acknowledge his honor now, is the true strength of the Skyborn." Her words hung in the shimmering heat, a radical, dangerous philosophy that struck at the heart of the tribe's hatred, causing the warriors to exchange glances of profound uncertainty, their rigid definitions of enemy and friend buckling under the weight of her conviction, leaving the outcome of the standoff balanced precariously on the edge of a knife, with many murmuring in low tones, unsure if this was heresy or a higher revelation. Tala's revolutionary words, intended to douse the flames of war, instead struck the assembly like a bolt of lightning, and in its wake, the ground was not cooled but superheated, split open by a new, internal fissure. Her radical interpretation of the sacred trial, that a white settler, an invader, could be a chosen instrument of the spirits, was a philosophy too bitter, too contradictory to the lived experience of her people, for many to swallow. The murmurs of uncertainty that had followed her profound speech did not settle into the quiet hush she usually commanded. They curdled, darkening into audible, angry dissent. The young war scout, his face still masked in vermilion paint but now streaked with the sweat of his earlier humiliation, saw his moment to reclaim the narrative, to pivot from his failure of fact to a new war of ideology. He exploded from his position near the flank, kicking his pony forward, his voice a roar, jagged tear in the fabric of the tense silence. "She is bewitched," he screamed, first in Apache, then repeating it in his harsh, broken English so Cole would understand the nature of his death. He did not dare point at the towering, muscular form of the Skyborn, but his implication was clear. His water was not just water. It was a white man's trick. He has poisoned her mind. He has softened her spirit against her own people. This accusation, though aimed at Tala, was a proxy for his true grievance. He wheeled his agitated pony, raising his rifle not at Cole, but at the ranch house itself, at the weathered porch, the sturdy barn, the newly strung barbed wire fence that ran to the horizon. "Look," he roared, his voice cracking with an indignation that was far more potent than his previous, fact-based claim. "This is the true violation. This woodhouse is the bullet. This fence of sharp wire is the knife in our mother's heart. We followed the Skyborn because we thought she was harmed by a man, but she was harmed by this." He gestured to the entire ranch. "This is the disease. Our hunting grounds are gone, the buffalo are gone, and now our most sacred figure tells us to see the spirits in the man who did it." The speech resonated with a visceral, painful truth that Tala's spiritual logic could not erase. A significant faction of younger warriors, perhaps 50 or 60 men who had ridden with the scout, who had seen their families starve and their lands shrink, began to shift their ponies, breaking the unified, circular formation. They moved to flank the scout, creating a new, aggressive line within the larger assembly, a clear and open challenge to the elder chief's authority. They were the ones for whom the old ways of honor and trials felt like a luxury. Their reality was survival, and they saw Cole Maddox not as an individual who had passed a test, but as a symbol of the relentless, parasitic encroachment that was choking the life from their people. The chief is old, the scouts ban, the ultimate act of defiance, his gaze locking with the elders. His ways are slow. He wants to talk while they take. He turned back to the agitated warriors. Tala, the Skyborn, is compromised. Her honor is pure, but her judgment is clouded by this settler's trickery. He pushed his horse forward, stopping only yards from the porch, his eyes burning with a zealot's fire. We came for justice. We came to make a stand. We are here. The ranch is surrounded. We will not be turned away by a confusing story and a cup of water. We will burn this place and send the message that the Aztande's land is not to be stolen. The elder chief's face turned to thunder. He roared a command for silence, striking the air with his hand, but the scouts' faction only shouted louder, raising their weapons. The split was now physical, loud, and undeniably dangerous. The chief's authority rested on tradition and the spiritual weight of the Skyborn, but the scout was channeling the raw, immediate, burning anger of a generation that had nothing left to lose. The chief was trapped between his profound, lifelong reverence for Tala, who stood like a 9-foot-tall bronze statue, her serious expression hardening, her mighty arms crossed over her beaded suede top as she watched her people defy her sacred word, and the practical, violent reality of his usurped command. The chief struggled to control the growing unrest, his orders for peace being met with defiant shouts for war. Cole and his ranch hands, who had just begun to breathe, felt the news tighten again. But this time it was worse. The monolithic, a terrifying wall of Apache warriors had fractured, evolving into a chaotic, internal power struggle. It was no longer a negotiation. It was a schism, and they were trapped in the epicenter, the prize to be claimed by whichever side won the soul of the Apache tribe. While we catch our breath by this dusty road, go on and tip your hat to the last rodeo. Give this story a like, and subscribe so you can ride with us again soon. All right then. Let's get back on the trail. The chaotic end of the fracturing tribe was reaching a fever pitch, a cacophony of angry shouts and the shrill whinnies of agitated ponies that threatened to drown out reason entirely. And Cole Maddox realized with a terrifying clarity that the elder chief's authority was crumbling before his eyes like a dry riverbank in a flood. The young scouts faction, fueled by years of bitterness and the volatile energy of youth, had effectively deafened themselves to the Skyborn's spiritual logic, their rifles raising inch by inch toward the bunkhouse where Cole's men huddled in paralyzing fear. And Cole knew that in the space of a single heartbeat, the first shot would be fired and the massacre would become irreversible. He looked at his ranch hands, men who had branded cattle with him, shared coffee in the bitter cold, and repaired fences until their hands bled, and he saw the resignation of death on their faces, a sight that ignited a fire in his gut hotter than the prairie sun. He knew he could not fight 300 warriors, nor could he win a shouting match against a demagogue, so he did the only thing left that a man of honor could do. He changed the terms of the engagement entirely. Slowly, deliberately, with a calmness that belied the thundering of his heart, Cole unbuckled his heavy leather gun belt, the weight of the Colt revolver sliding from his hip to hit the wooden porch floor with a clatter that, for a split second, cut through the noise. Then, empty-handed and stripped of all defense, he stepped down from the safety of the porch and walked directly into the dusty, sun-baked void between the ranch house and the wall of Apache warriors. The movement was so unexpected, so suicidally bold, that the shouting faltered, the young scouts faction pausing in sheer confusion as this solitary white man walked steadily toward them, stopping only when he was within striking distance of the scouts' war pony. Cole stood alone, a small figure against the backdrop of the vast, hostile army, and he spread his arms wide, exposing his chest to the rifles, making himself the easiest target on the frontier. "You say I am the enemy," Cole roared, his voice cracking with the strain but projecting a raw, undeniable power that reached every ear. "You say I am the trickster. You say I am the one who insults your people. Fine." He took a step closer to the scout, staring up into the painted, angry face. "Then take me. I am the owner of this land. I am the one who gave the water. I am the one who stands here. My men are just hands. They do what I say. They are innocent of your anger. If you believe I intended harm, if you believe I am a threat, then settle it with me, right here, right now." He gestured back to the ranch house without looking. "Let them go. Burn the house if you must. Drive off the cattle, but let the men ride out. I offer myself as the payment for whatever that you think is owed." A stunned silence descended over the yard, heavier and more profound than before, as the sheer audacity of the offer sank in. The ranch hands, who had expected their boss to order them to fire, stared in open-mouthed disbelief, witnessing a depth of courage they had never suspected lay beneath Cole's quiet exterior. To the Apaches, who valued bravery above almost all else, this was a confusing display. A coward does not offer his life for his servants, and a trickster does not walk unarmed into the face of death. From the center of the formation, Tolly watched him, her 9-foot frame towering over the scene, her muscular physique tense and ready, her long, dark hair slicked against her shoulder as she leaned on her staff. Her deep, warm tan skin seemed to glow in the intensity of the moment, and her focused, serious expression narrowed into a look of piercing recognition. She had seen this man through the haze of her dehydration, thinking his kindness was a simple anomaly, but now she saw the truth. The resolve that had compelled him to share his water with a terrifying giant was the same resolve that now compelled him to sacrifice himself for his people. It was not weakness, it was a warrior spirit, burning brightly in the chest of a farmer, and as she watched him stand unflinching before the rifle of the man who wanted him dead, the Skyborn realized that Cole Maddox was not merely a settler to be tolerated, but a man who possessed a soul that mirrored the very best of her own people's code of honor. The silence that followed Cole's sacrificial offer was not the silence of peace, but the breathless, terrifying vacuum that precedes an execution, a moment stretched thin by the tension of 100 trigger fingers hovering over 100 liches. The young scout, his face twisted into a mask of triumphant hate, leveled his rifle at Cole's chest, the distance between the muzzle and the rancher's heart so short that a miss was impossible. And in that fraction of a second, the destiny of the frontier seemed already written in blood. But before the hammer could fall, the sun was blotted out by a shadow that moved with the speed of a striking viper and the weight of a collapsing cliff face. Tala, the 9-foot-tall Skyborn, had crossed the distance between the tribal center and the confrontation in 2 massive strides, her movement creating a draft of air that whipped the dust into a frenzy. She did not gently intervene. She planted herself physically between the scout's weapon and Cole's defenseless body, her towering form acting as a living shield that no bullet could bypass without first piercing the sacred vessel of the spirits. With a roar that sounded like a rock slide, she slammed the butt of her carved staff into the earth, the impact sending a shockwave through the ground that caused the scout's pony to rear violently in panic. She stood there, a titan of judgment, her muscular physique rippling with lethal intent, the deep, warm tan of her skin flushing darker with fury. Her long, dark hair, black as the deepest mine shaft and slick with the oils of her ritual, whipped around her face before settling heavily over her right shoulder, framing an expression of such focused, serious intensity that even the bravest warriors flinched. She looked down at the scout, who now found his rifle pointing uselessly at the intricate white and blue beadwork of her suede crop top, and then swept her gaze across the fractured ranks of her people. "You seek blood?" she bellowed, her voice vibrating in the rib cages of every man present. "Then take mine, for I stand with the truth, and if you wish to kill the honor of the Apache, you must first kill the daughter of the mountain." She spread her arms wide, exposing her midriff and the thick leather belt that held her suede skirt, daring them to strike. "I am Skyborn," she proclaimed, the title echoing like thunder. "My word is the breath of the ancestors. My trial is the will of the spirits. And I tell you this, any warrior who raises a weapon against this man, raises it against me, and against the very sky that birthed us." The warriors froze, the spiritual weight of her threat pressing down on them. To harm a Skyborn was not merely murder. It was a blasphemy that would curse their lineage forever. Polly lowered her voice slightly, though it lost none of its power, shifting from a threat to a sermon. "I know your pain," she cried out, acknowledging the scouts' faction. "I know the settlers have carved scars into our land. I know they have broken treaties, starved our children, and fenced the open plains. I carry that anger in my blood just as you do. I do not ask you to forget the crimes of the many." She turned slightly, gesturing to Cole, who stood unharmed in her shadow. "But honor is not a blanket we throw over a race. It is a fire we find in the individual heart. This man is not the settlers. This man is Cole. When the spirit stripped me of my strength, when I was less than a child in the dust, he gave me life. He offered his own blood," she pointed to the water trough, "to save a stranger. And now, he offers his life to save his servants. This is not the behavior of a thief. This is the behavior of a chief." She looked directly at the young scout, her eyes boring into his soul. "If we kill him now, we do not kill an enemy. We kill a man who passed the test of humanity. And if we do that, we become the savages they claim we are. We become no better than the liars who stole our land." The logic of her words, combined with the terrifying, physical reality of her protection, broke the spell of the scout's rage. The warriors looked at the skyborn, this massive, sweating, a powerful figure in traditional attire, and then at the small, unarmed white man she was protecting, and the dissonance was resolved. They could not shoot through her. They could not ignore her. One by one, the rifles in the back ranks were lowered. The older warriors, who remembered the old codes of honor that Tala spoke of, nodded in solemn agreement, their respect for her spiritual authority overriding their desire for revenge. Even the scouts' faction began to dissolve, the men turning their ponies away, unable to hold their aim against the living embodiment of their religion. The scout sat alone for a moment, his weapon shaking, before he finally, furiously, lowered the barrel, defeated not by force of arms, but by the overwhelming, undeniable power of the Skyborn's truth. The fragile, crystalline silence that followed Tala's thunderous defense hung precariously in the air, a standoff of spiritual authority against a lifetime of hatred, with Cole Maddox still standing in the dust, shielded by the impossible, 9-foot-tall shadow of the Skyborn. The young scout, though shamed and his weapon lowered, still vibrated with a furious, forwarded energy, his faction of warriors simmering behind him, unsure whether to obey their spiritual leader or their thirst for vengeance. It was a balance that could not hold, a single breath away from collapsing back into chaos. But the blow that finally shattered the tension came not from within the circle, but from far outside it. A sharp, dry crack, the unmistakable report of a long-range rifle, echoed from the rocky hills to the east, a sound distinct from the Apache weapons in the ranchers' Winchesters. Before anyone could react, a whiz of superheated lead snapped past Cole's head, thumping into the porch railing just inches from where his foreman, Jeb, was crouched, sending splinters flying. An instant later, a second shot, whack, kicked up a violent puff of dust near the elder chief's pony, causing the animal to rear and scream in terror. For a heart-stopping second, all eyes snapped to the source of the betrayal. The war scout's head whipped back toward the ranch, his eyes reignited with accusation, believing it was a final, desperate trick by Cole's men. Cole simultaneously spun, thinking a rogue Apache had broken ranks. But before the internal conflict could explode, a third and fourth shot rang out, confirming the new threat. "Bandits," Cole roared, his frontiersman's instinct instantly recognizing the tactic. "In the rocks. They're firing on both of us." Tala, who had been a spiritual shield for Cole, transformed in an instant into a field general. Her 9-foot-tall, muscular physique pivoted, her focused, serious expression becoming lethally sharp as she scanned the distant ridge. Her superior height gave her an unparalleled view, and she saw the muzzle flashes. 4. No, 5 men nestled in the high rocks, their position chosen perfectly to rain fire down on the concentrated mass of people in the ranch yard. She realized their goal with sickening clarity. They were not trying to win a fight, they were trying to start one, hoping to spark the massacre that would leave the ranch defenseless and the Apache war party disorganized, a field of plunder for the picking. The elder chief barked a furious command in Apache, the realization dawning on him at the same moment. This was a common enemy, parasites drawn to the smell of a large-scale conflict. The war scout, his face a mask of confusion, saw an arrow, fired from his own ranks, splinter against the rocks near the bandits, confirming the new target. What happened next was an act that defined the history of the frontier. Cole sprinted back to the porch, grabbing his own rifle. On the ridge, he yelled to his men, "Fire on the ridge, not the tribe. Cover them." Simultaneously, the elder chief raised his lance, not toward the ranch, but toward the hills, and let out a piercing war cry. The Apache warriors, models of disciplined chaos, did not charge the ranch. They wheeled their ponies in a magnificent, thundering wave and charged away from it, fanning out to present moving targets as they raced toward the bandits' position, their own rifles and bows returning fire. For the first time, ranchers and Apaches fought side by side. From the porch, Cole and his men used their fixed positions to lay down precise, covering fire, their Winchesters cracking in a steady rhythm, forcing the bandits to keep their heads down while the Apache warriors closed the distance. Cole watched in awe as an Apache warrior, charging recklessly, was saved when a bullet from Judd's rifle took out the bandit aiming at him. A moment later, a bandit who broke cover and tried to rush the porch was silently dropped by an arrow from one of the chief's guards. And in the center of it all stood Tala, a giant in the storm, her carved staff planted in the ground, her deep, warm tan skin slick with sweat as she boomed commands, her voice cutting through the gunfire, her long, dark hair whipping around her shoulders as she pointed out hidden positions that only her eyes could see. The bandits, expecting to witness a massacre, found themselves the target of a uniformed, two-pronged assault, and their ambush collapsed into a panic rout. The echoes of the last rifle shots faded into the vast, indifferent blue of the prairie sky, leaving behind a silence heavier and more profound than any that had come before. The smell of burnt black powder hung thick in the air, a shared scent of battle that stung the nostrils of both rancher and warrior. Slowly, from the rocky ridges where they had routed the bandits, the Apache warriors began to filter back, their ponies no longer agitated for war but walking with a steady, business-like pace. They did not immediately threaten the ranch. Instead, they regrouped in the dusty yard, their formation no longer the tight, suffocating ring of execution it had been, but a looser, more formal assembly, their faces grim and smeared with the sweat of the recent skirmish. Cole and his men stood on the porch, their Winchesters still warm but now held loosely at their sides, their own adrenaline ebbing, leaving them exhausted and hyper-aware of the 300 armed men who had just saved them, and whom they had just saved. The tension of war was gone, replaced by the deep, unsettling awkwardness of peace, a peace forged in a shared baptism of fire that no one had anticipated. The elder chief dismounted, his movements stiff from the fight, and walked into the space between the two groups. He looked not at Tala, but directly at Cole, his obsequious chip eyes, which had previously held only suspicion, now holding a deep, weary, and undeniable respect. "You, rancher," the chief began, his voice rough. "You stood unarmed when my own warriors were clouded by rage. You offered your life for your men. This is the act of a brave man." He then gestured to the hills, where the bandits had fled or fallen. "And your rifles," he nodded to the men on the porch, spoke with true aim. "Not against us, but for us." The Skyborn's words about your honor were proven not by her investigation alone, but by your own actions. The earth did not lie, and neither did your courage. As he spoke, the young war scout, who had fought just as fiercely against the bandits, sat his pony on the edge of the crowd, his face a mask of shame. His accusations, first of ambush and then of trickery, had been utterly disproven, not by words, but by Cole's willingness to die and his willingness to fight alongside them. The faction of warriors who had followed him were now silent, their gazes fixed on the ground, their thirst for war extinguished and replaced by the humbling realization that they had nearly executed the wrong man. Their fiery rebellion had been rendered null, their leader shamed, and their purpose dissolved in the face of a truth that was now impossible to deny. Into this new, respectful silence, Thala stepped forward, her 9-foot-tall, muscular physique casting a long, protective shadow over the porch. She had retrieved her carved staff, and she held it now not as a weapon, but as a scepter of her authority. Her long, dark hair was still slick, clinging to the deep, warm tan of her shoulder, and her focused, serious expression had softened, just slightly, though it lost none of its intensity. The white and blue beadwork on her tan suede crop top seemed to shimmer in the afternoon light as she walked past Cole and onto the porch itself. Her movement caused the ranch hands to flinch, but she ignored them. She stopped at the ranch house door and placed her massive, calloused palm flat against the weathered wood, a gesture that was both possessive and protective. She closed her eyes for a long moment, her lips moving in a silent Apache prayer, and when she turned back to the assembly, her voice was not the thunder of her previous defense, but the deep, resonant calm of a verdict delivered. "The spirits of this place are now bound to the honor of this man," she proclaimed, her voice carrying effortlessly to every warrior. "This house," she slapped the wood again, the sound a dull thud, "is ashy. It is sacred ground. It is protected by the word of the Skyborn. We will not ride against it." She then looked directly at Cole, her gaze pinning him. "Your name, Cole Maddox, will be carried back to our people. It will be spoken with honor. You are Inda, a friend. Any who ride under my banner will know this place is a sanctuary, not a target. The debt of my life has been paid by your bravery, and a new bond has been forged in the blood of our shared enemies." The great, chaotic assembly of Apache warriors began to resolve itself back into the disciplined column that had been at dawn. The ponies, restless from the fight, now turning in unison toward the eastern hills. The elder chief, having given his final, respectful nod to Cole, was already mounted, his face impassive as he led his people away from the land he had come to conquer. The shamed war scout and his faction were gone, absorbed back into the mass, their brief rebellion over. The immediate, suffocating threat that had defined the morning had evaporated, leaving only the scent of dust, horse, and gunpowder in the quiet, superheated air. Cole stood by his porch railing, his rifle now leaning against the wall, his hands aching from gripping the stock, watching the 300 men begin their withdrawal. His own ranch hands were emerging from the bunkhouse, their faces pale and streaked with sweat, staring in disbelief at the impossible peace that had settled over the yard. Just as the last of the warriors began to move, a colossal shadow fell over Cole. He turned to find Talus standing before him, having separated from the departing Colin for this final, private word. She stood only a few feet away, close enough for him to feel the heat radiating from her and to see the intricate details he had only glimpsed in moments of terror. She was, in this quiet moment, even more overwhelming, a young adult woman of 9 feet, her muscular physique a testament to the strength she had so recently displayed, a body that seemed carved from the same red rock as the canyons. Her skin, a deep, warm tan, was slick with the sweat of the battle and the day's heat. Her long, dark hair, black and heavy, was pulled back, hanging over her right shoulder in a thick, wet-looking rope. She was wearing the traditional attire that set her apart, the crop top of tan suede, tied at the back, exposing the powerful, defined muscles of her midriff and arms, the garment trimmed with the shimmering white and blue beadwork that spoke of her sacred status. A thick leather belt held the matching suede skirt at her waist. Her expression, which had been so focused and serious, so full of fury and judgment, was now quiet, almost soft, though it lost none of its profound intensity. She looked down at him, her gaze traveling from his face to the porch, and then to the hills where the bandits had been. "You have a strong home, Cole Maddox," she said, her deep, resonant voice now a quiet vibration between them, no longer the thunder that had commanded armies. "You have made it stronger today." Cole, unsure what to say to a living deity who had just saved his life, could only nod, his throat dry. You saved us all. I don't know how to thank you." Tala's lips twitched, the closest he had seen to a smile. "It is I who must thank you again. First, for my life, and second, for my truth." She gestured with her chin toward the departing warriors. "My people, they live with a great anger. It is a just anger. They see the fence and the plow, and they see the end of our world. They are taught that all settlers are the same, that all kindness is a trick." She paused, looking at her own massive hands. "You taught me a new word to speak. You taught them that honor is not a color, that bravery is not a tribe." She looked back at him, her eyes seeming to pierce his very soul. "My staff," she said, gripping the carved wood, "can break a man's body. Your canteen, it broke a wall between nations. Remember this, rancher. Simple kindness, given in a moment of truth, echoes across the plains more powerfully than any weapon. It is the one sound that both our peoples can understand." She said no more. She offered him a slight, respectful bow of her head, a gesture of profound equality that stunned him more than her height, and then she turned, with the same fluid, ground-covering strides that had carried her into his yard. She walked away, her massive form moving with an athletic grace that seemed impossible for her size. She did not look back as she rejoined the column, falling in at the rear, her 9-foot frame a moving anchor to the 300 warriors. Cole Maddox remained on his porch, his boots planted on the splintered wood where the bandit's bullet had struck, and watched the Apache war party ride away. He watched them until they were just a rising cloud of dust against the bleeding edge of the horizon, the last flicker of light catching the high, impossible silhouette of the giant girl before she, too, was swallowed by the landscape, fading back into the realm of myth and high, lonely places. The ranch was silent, but it was a new silence, not one of fear, but of profound, sacred stillness. He looked at the bullet-scarred porch, at the canteen still lying in the dust by the fence, and he knew his life, his very land, was irrevocably changed. His small, isolated ranch, which had been an outpost of defiance against a hostile world, now stood as a rare, improbable bridge between two warring peoples. And as the sun finally began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of blood and fire, Cole Maddox understood with absolute certainty that his one simple act of mercy, a single cup of water offered to a dying stranger, had not just changed the outcome of a single day, or saved the if this story stirred a memory or two. Saddle up with us again. Hit subscribe and help keep these old frontier tales alive. Out here, every name, every trail, every sunset still matters. So till we meet again, friend, keep your hat tipped to the past and your heart pointed west.